It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Perhaps before I get into tonight's presentation, I can give you a little background about myself as to how I got here. I was originally trained as an orthopedic surgeon. I even went to the Olympics in the 1980s and 1984 as an assistant team physician for the United States Olympic Committee. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, I had much success here. I also had the privilege throughout my life to mentor many young men and women. Specifically, when I lived in South Florida, I used to teach at the University of Miami as a volunteer for Esha Torah and Or Sameach. These are two Kiruv organizations that help promote Judaism on campus with the idea of sending people to Israel to learn about their great roots, to learn about their great Torah and what we can learn from there. And throughout the years, I became more and more involved in people's social lives. Specifically, they would ask me many questions on dating. And I must say that about 25 or 26 years ago when I first started, I was clueless. But with there's a will, there's a way. I decided I was going to educate myself. And slowly but surely, I started to learn as much as I could about dating. I was fortunate in that I had two mentors in my life who were considered some of the greatest rabbis in the world. One was a man called Rabbi Miller, who I would highly encourage you to start reading his books. He was a genius in terms of human nature, and he taught me so much on the subject of human interaction. And the second rabbi, who today is still considered one of the greats of the world, is Rabbi Shalom Arush. He wrote the magnum opus called The Garden of Emunah, which has been translated in over 10 languages. Millions and millions of copies of the book exist throughout the world. It's probably more popular than the Bible. And from these men, I learned how to understand the psyche of what goes into dating. You know, we see so much going on in the world today in terms of not lack of happiness and people, so much divorce, and I'll get into that a little tonight. And I want to tell you something, that in order to achieve success, you don't have to go looking for some fairy tale method out there. It's all in our holy Torah. If we just learn how to access it, if we can learn to mine its nuggets. Let me start tonight with a story to show you what is the end product of what you seek in life, what you ultimately would like to experience in terms of a relationship. There was a couple that got married in Israel, and they got married in the springtime when it was about Lag BaOmer, which is that famous holiday when like bonfires, and it's a wonderful holiday. And so the man or the groom's grandmother had this wonderful habit, or a custom, let's call it, of presenting a new bride that came into the family with a piece of jewelry. So one day she knocks on the door of her granddaughter-to-be, and she hands her a box. She opens the gift wrap box, and she's a magnificent diamond, even nicer than what her husband or husband-to-be gave her, her fiancé gave her. And she was just incredibly taken by this magnanimous chesed, this incredible act of kindness. Well, anyway, the day of the wedding came. The only thing that was very interesting about the ring was that it was a little loose. But no worries, she put the ring on that the grandma had given her, the diamond ring, and right in front of that, her wedding band. She danced the night away. Now, as we know, amongst the Orthodox community, and even not the Orthodox community, the first 7 days are celebrated as Sheva Berachot, days of festivities, in which the bride and groom are fed and they're celebrated with, and every night someone makes a party called Sheva Berachot, otherwise known as the 7 blessings, because these 7 blessings are said under the chuppah. And they were there for Shabbat in the seaside coast town of Netanya, enjoying themselves in the groom's family's house. When they sat down for lunch, and after they sat down for lunch, the groom's mother noticed, she said, "Judy, where's your ring?" And she looks at her finger, she says, "I don't know. I can't imagine what could have happened. We went on a walk today by the seashore, by the beach. I hope I didn't lose it there, because then it's a foregone conclusion that I'll ever find it." Anyway, they went down to look, they couldn't find anything. And then when the bride and groom, the young couple, came back to the apartment, the mother-in-law had gone up to the guest room where they were staying. She had gone through her daughter-in-law's all private stuff, including her lingerie. The daughter-in-law was mortified. She didn't know what to say. She was beside herself, and she was wondering what happened. Suddenly, the mother-in-law says, "Do you have any idea what that ring cost?" "I know very well that ring cost at least $5,000. All day, Shabbat, there was like an icy bridge between her and the mother-in-law. Finally, after Shabbat, they made Havdalah, which they concluded the Shabbat, and she asked her husband, Zevi, "Please run back to our apartment in Jerusalem. I'm hoping that I left it by the sink when I took off to wash my face." So he gets into his car, and he goes on back to the apartment. He calls her from the apartment about an hour later. He goes, "Judy, I can't find it. It's not to be found." And from that day on, relations between Judy and her mother-in-law became very icy. Unfortunately, this was not a good thing, so the father of the groom decided to make a lunch in the middle of the summer, invite Judy and their son to try to make a rapprochement or a peace between both of them. And so they had them over for lunch and everything's going well, and they decided that they were going to present the bride and groom with a beautiful vase. So as they're getting ready to leave the apartment of the parents, the mother who was tasked with the job of giving the vase to Judy suddenly tells her, you know what, on second thought, maybe I shouldn't give you this vase. Let me hand it over to Zevi because he's so much better and you might break it. At that point, World War III erupted. And she says to her mother-in-law, that's it, it's over. I never want anything to do with you again. I'm done. From then on in, they didn't speak throughout the balance of the summer. Until Rosh Hashanah came that year, and Zevi had to go get he had a special coat that he wore for the holidays and for Shabbos. But he hadn't worn it since the day he got married. So he puts it on, and he says to his wife, wow, I can't even close the buttons because you're such a great cook. I probably gained weight. And as he's attempting to close the button, he feels a lump right here by the pocket, by the side pocket of the coat. He puts his hand in there, and wow, out comes the ring. And from then on, she just was exhilarated. Judy, she says, I can't believe it. All the while, your mother thought that I was the shlamazel, that I was the person who lost it, but it was you. So guess what? What was the first phone call that Judy made? Was to Zevi's mother. And she said to him, you know what? We found the ring, but it wasn't me. It was your son. He was the one who was responsible for the loss. So she told him how they found it in his pocket. And from that day on, Judy always let him know that he was the one who lost the ring. Whenever there was an errand to be run, for example, if they had to deposit money to the bank, she would say to him just sarcastically, should I send along a Brinks guard to go with you because you might lose the money? If they had to take the kids to the park, she would say the same thing. Make sure you don't lose them. She would jab him and he wouldn't say anything. Well, guess what happened? Years went on. Grandma now was in the next world. And you know how women are. They get a hankering to buy new jewelry, trade up to new. They get bored of their jewelry. So she knew that grandma, who was the groom's grandma, used to shop exclusively in one store in Jerusalem for all her jewelry. She decided to go in there one day and she introduced herself. She says, you know my husband's grandma, she used to shop by you. And the diamond dealer says to her, the jeweler says, of course, Mrs. Bernstein, I'll never forget her. She was such a loyal customer. She came to me for everything. She says, you know what? She gave me a piece of jewelry like she gives all the girls who marry into the family. And I'm sure she bought it from you. I want to appraise it. So he looks at the ring and he puts his microscope on it and he goes, you know what? This is a magnificent ring. It's worth at least $10,000. But I know my inventory. I know my merchandise. Lady, I didn't sell this ring. Go home, open up your safe, pull out your GIA certificate like we have, bring it back to me. Let's see where this came from. What's the origin of this stone? So she went home and she duly went into her bedroom where she keeps her safe. She opened up her safe. She got the certificate. Everything looks in order until she saw a document and she turned white as a ghost. She waited up for her husband to come home that day and they were having dinner. She says, you know, Zevi, I've been getting bored of my jewelry. I want to trade up. You remember that piece, that gorgeous diamond ring that grandma gave me? He said, sure, yeah, what's up? He says, you know what? I went back to grandma's favorite jeweler that she bought it from and I showed it to him. And guess what? He told me it's worth double what she paid for it. So he said, fantastic. So you can go get yourself something even nicer. See, she says to him, you know what? It doesn't make sense. We got married in May around Lag BaOmer, right? Then when I looked around for more documents inside the safe, I saw the receipt. And this receipt says September 20th. Zevi, doesn't make sense. How could it be that this was bought in September? And then I came to the conclusion that you went and bought me a new ring in order for me to be able to make peace again with your parents. And now I realized why all those years you weren't home at night late twice a week, because you probably took a second job in order to be able to pay off the major loan that you took in order to buy this ring. She said to her husband, goes, I thought that your grandma gave me a diamond. I never realized that the diamond was sitting right across the table from me, and that's you. That you're the diamond. And so tonight's goal, ladies and gentlemen, is to learn how to date so we could find that diamond. And let's start with this. Let me tell you the following. We see today a rash of divorces. What's creating divorce today? Especially in the Jewish community. I want to zone in on the Jewish community. Because when we used to be insulated from this disease, this societal disease, we're now seeing it amongst ourselves. And I want to point to 4 reasons that's creating divorce amongst the Jewish community, as we see as well in the society at large. Number 1, we've become a disposable society. Who fixes appliances anymore? Toaster ovens or microwaves or phones. Phones are discarded after 2 years of use. And this thinking, unfortunately, has seeped into our attitudes towards the people in our lives. And we hear it in the conversations and social occasions, which we don't have as much anymore because of Corona. But people are glib to say, you know what? If I'm not happy in my marriage, I'll just get divorced. People just throw the word around like it's meaningless. And when we see relationships as disposable, whether it's a friendship or a marriage, the sacred bond becomes easily unglued. And what has happened is we've lost the ability to value what we have, including the people that we're supposed to cherish. So number 1, we're living in a disposable society, and as a result, that has seeped into our mindset. Number 2, instant gratification. WhatsApp, texting, and emails have brought us to expect an immediate response. Otherwise, we wonder, what's taking so long? If I want something, I just click a button on Amazon and it's here tomorrow. Unfortunately, that also has seeped into our mindset. Remember the old days when we had to take film in to be processed? It wasn't like today. We had a canister of film, we took it to a film processing store. We needed to wait patiently 7 to 10 days until the film came back and we saw all the wonderful pictures. Who can imagine today not viewing your photo on your cell phone and sending it to your friend in London or Paris or in Israel? 2 seconds later they have the photo. And what does that have to do with relationships? Well, serious dating takes work. You're not always going to see instant results. Love grows with time. Unfortunately, too many people bail out. I sit with many people. I'm very involved with shidduchim and matchmaking. I'm also involved in dating, mentoring with people throughout the world. By the way, let me just take a moment to tell you that if anyone needs my help in dating or would like dating mentoring or anything, you can reach me at 305-206-1916 from anywhere in the world. You might want to first send me a WhatsApp or a text to that because sometimes I'm busy, but I'll be happy to answer you and help you in any which way. Or you can send me an email to drjackcohen18@gmail.com. But anyway, love grows with time. The more we nourish a relationship, the greater we feel invested in it. If we don't automatically fall in love with someone, does that mean we just trash the relationship? When couples look back through their years of being together, they realize how much they've evolved and that relationships take time to nurture. They're like plants. They have to be watered. They have to constantly be weeded. And so we have to realize expecting instant gratification will strip us of the opportunity to work through the difficult. And it's working through the difficult in our relationships that creates fantastic relationships. Another problem, a great word that's bantered about these days is FOMO, fear of missing out. And this is creating and wreaking havoc in dating. You see parties posted online, you see other people's vacations, you see delicious sushi or steak dinners, and you think to yourself, what about me? This fear of missing out is not good for singles. Comparing our lives, wondering if there's something else better out there, and checking out Facebook only feeds this frenzy. People are too busy counting everyone else's blessings to see their own blessings that they're right in front of their doorstep. So we yearn for what someone else has in their pastures, not realizing that what we have is the best thing that we could possibly have. Emunah, which is faith in God, is to come to realize that whatever I have is the best thing for me, and that jealousy will not help me in any way. Another thing that we want to talk about is we live in a disconnected world. Technology has connected us, but has also brought us farther apart. We've become used to communicating through text instead of speaking. And communication, as you know, is the key to great dating and great marriages and great relationships. Singles have told us again and again that the dating hit a roadblock when they began texting instead of talking. So one of the critical areas that we've stopped doing is great communication, and goes in 2 directions. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is to put down our devices and pay more attention to what's going on around us and to the people that are important in our lives. At this point, let me step back and ask a question, or rather, give some background as to what is love. We've grown up in a society that extols both love between man and woman and self-love, yet this society seems often incapable of loving itself or loving someone else. We're told what the world needs now is love, sweet love, and it's the only thing that there's too little of. Unfortunately, we seem to be doing something wrong because, as we said, divorce rates seem to be so high. Our fast-paced electronic life propels us towards immediate gratification rather than relationships developed over time. And we've become part of an increasingly superficial society where we define our bodies as ourselves and we equate physical attraction with love. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the presentation. But we're not helpless. We have wisdom. We have the wisdom of the Torah. Judging by popular music, nothing today is more sought after than love. True love seems to be eluding so many people, and often for good reason. Either we don't know what love is, or we don't know how to get it. Before you can love someone, you must love yourself. It's so important. Healthy self-love is a prerequisite for a healthy relationship. So it's important that we come in touch with ourselves. Now, I want to tell you a story about a woman named Gila Mandelson. Gila Mandelson started her life as a secular Jew who knew nothing about Judaism. She was propelled to come to investigate her roots as she came back to Judaism as an Orthodox Jew because she was invited to go to a wedding in Israel. When she came to the wedding, she saw something she was told that the bride and groom have never touched, ever, and that they will be touching each other for the first time after the wedding. So she tells about her story in her life as she now became someone who became observant. And she writes the following: after more than enough dating, it was clear my husband-to-be, my fiancé, Abraham, was going to propose to me. But first he told me protocol requires that I meet the head of his yeshiva where he was studying to be a Torah scholar. Abraham led me into his dean's office. A decidedly rabbinic-looking figure sat behind a large desk. So he said to her, you must be Gila. He said with a more warm smile, helping her to relax. He and Abraham exchanged a few pleasantries, and then she writes, my soon-to-be fiancé politely exited. Still smiling, the rabbi asked me a little bit about myself. The conversation was flowing, and I was certain, she writes, that I was making a great impression on the rabbi. Then there was a pause. The rabbi, or the dean of the school, leaned forward and gazed at me intently. And he asks me, so Gila, please tell me, what's your definition of love? And Gila says, I wasn't prepared for that kind of question, but I was doing well so far. I figured I could handle it. And listen to how she answers the question. She tells the rabbi, she says, love. Well, love, I began confidently, she says, is the feeling you have when you feel like you have that feeling. I trailed off, my self-assurance dissipating like a balloon losing air. She blew it. She couldn't even define what the word love is, and that's when it hit me, she writes. I expected to love my husband to be. In fact, I felt that I was loving him, but I can't even define what love is. And in my humble opinion, as they tell us today, love can't be defined, she says that's utter nonsense. Because if love can't be defined, that means you can't pursue it. And we know that you can pursue love. First of all, it can't be a feeling, as the way I attempted to define it to the rabbi. Because if for feelings alone can't establish a bond. While physical attraction and chemistry and connection are essential and add excitement to a loving relationship, guess what? Physical attraction can unconsciously draw you to a lousy human being, a grown-up baby, an abuser, or someone just totally wrong for you. So we have to come to the conclusion that it's not about physical attraction. And what's the proof? Just go stand when you check out at any supermarket and look at the latest divorce in Hollywood on the cover of National Enquirer. Another 60-day wedding, another 90-day wedding. There's no eternity to these marriages. There's no longevity to any of them. These are weddings, these are marriages based purely on physical attraction and infatuation, not built on anything else. Therefore, while love entails and culminates in intense emotion, it's got to be based on something more than just physical attraction. Reason. It has to be based on reason. So before you lose your head, you must delve deeply into who the other person is that you're dating. Evaluate not just his or her personality, but more importantly, what's his or her character and values. And that's what I'm going to be drilling hard on tonight. That we, in the Torah world, we that are Orthodox, we try to focus on the values and the character of the person. We seek that. That's what we need. That's the fuel for a long-term relationship. Now, you must identify that person's virtues, and they must be rooted in a belief system so strong to withstand temptation so they wouldn't create infidelity. Whether the person you're dating is liberal or conservative politically makes no difference. Whether they're deliberate or spontaneous makes no difference. Or whether they're extroverted or introverted is not that important. But you know what's important? What's important is the person that you're dating. Are they caring? Are they loyal? Are they patient? Are they responsible? Are they honest? Are they willing to work things out? Are they morally unshakable? Those are the qualities that you need to be searching for when you date. The same is true for love. Love is not just about finding the right person. Love is about you being the right person. So if you don't possess the values and character you want the other person to have, well, guess what? You better get to work. So, in addition to seeing the good in each other, love requires that you remain focused on it, which means you have to work on it. I'm helping a couple right now that's been married 40 years. They moved from Europe into the Baltimore area. And the wife called me crying 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard a compliment in 30 years from him. And I'm working on this man right now. We meet once a week in order to be able to help that person understand what it means. You have to compliment your spouse. You have to make them feel special. Therefore, love is not just a feeling. You don't have to wait for it. You can go and create it. You could seek it. So love then is not emotional. It's rational. Not passive, but highly active. And so she writes, here's how I would define what love is. I'll define it the way my husband's dean defined it that day for me. And that is, love is the attachment that results from deeply appreciating someone else's goodness. Again, love is the feeling that you have when you appreciate someone else's goodness. Love is not just a feeling and a passion. Love is a system of attitudes and a series of actions which engender growth between you and your beloved. And those attitudes and acts come because you're moved by her goodness. You're moved by his goodness. And as a result, you really appreciate that. A husband and a wife with this kind of love won't throw in the towel when their relationship takes a downturn. Instead, they'll say, you know what? Well, we can have our challenges, but underneath it all, you are still that same good person you've always been. So what if some of the good feelings are gone? But guess what? We'll fight and we'll get them back. So she writes the following, and this is so endemic of what's going on in society today. I once met the perfect couple. Larry and Linda were on the same page in virtually everything. They agreed in travel, they agreed on politics, they agreed in diet, they agreed on their take on the environment. You name it, they were in agreement. Never saw two people so made for each other. And they seemed so happy together. They were enviable. And guess what? Larry and Linda are now divorced. What happened? Despite their amazing compatibility, why didn't their marriage last? Because neither Larry nor Linda possessed the ethic of striving to improve themselves. Nor did they see marriage as a spiritual path to commit to and work on. As a result, self-centeredness took over, leaving each one, both Larry and Linda, more devoted to themselves than to the other person or to their crumbling relationship. So you see the point that I'm getting at here, that we're looking for a person with virtue, with character, with devotion, with refinement. To succeed in dating, focus on what matters most, character. Focus on character, and again, focus on values, including that you look at the ethos and you believe in the ethos of self-improvement, both you and the person you're dating, and commitment to the relationship. Unfortunately, you won't find that in today's magazines. Can you imagine a magazine that says, kick that binge away if you want to lose 5 pounds? Instead, there's an expression that they say, you always see this in magazines at the beginning of the summer, you want to lose 5 pounds, self-binges, kick the habit today. Drive a man crazy with your morality? No, you wouldn't see that today because morality doesn't sell magazines. The fact that love means appreciating someone else's goodness implies something fundamental. Love means going beyond yourself. And that is what we look for when we're seeking love. We want someone who's selfless. Girls frequently ask me, when a guy says I love you, how do I know he means it? I have a standard reply. Ask him what he loves about you, and then ask yourself if that's who you really are. So a person named Amy asked her intelligent, articulate boyfriend, "Why do you love me?" Expecting a deep and moving reply from her boyfriend. And the boyfriend responded affectionately, "Because you're so cute." And she retorted, "Because I'm so cute? Then go get yourself a puppy." After breaking up with him, Amy said, "My ex-boyfriend saw me primarily as an ornament. That's all I was to him, an ornament. He wasn't interested in knowing me. Not only wasn't this love that could not last, it wasn't even love to begin with." Here's an example of how it goes sour, of people who don't look for a character. Nathan was the most eligible bachelor in town. Everyone knew it. He was handsome, he was well liked, and his father was very rich. Nathan made sure everyone knew that one day, all this money, all the possessions, all the assets, the company, it'll all be mine. He dressed well, drove a fancy sports car, and he was known to be generous on dates. Nancy, on the other side of town, was stunning. She came from a poor home, but had exquisite taste. She dreamed about marrying a handsome man, setting up a beautiful home, and raising gorgeous children who would lack for nothing. When she got her turn with Nathan, there was little question that they were the perfect match. The wealthy guy from the wealthy home, the debonair single man with the exquisitely beautiful looking Nancy from the other side of town. Nathan felt a sense of pride being seen with such a stunningly beautiful girl, just as he felt after he bought his first Corvette sports car. They both wanted the finer things in life and paid little attention or no attention to each other's character. After all, most of life's difficulties could be overcome with a little cash, and what an impressive couple they made when they walked down the street. When Nancy and Nathan became engaged, everyone thought, but of course, they were considered the ideal couple. They were the glamour couple of the city. Heads would turn when they would walk into a restaurant, and people envied the life of wealth that Nancy would now be living. Nathan's father bought them a luxurious home that Nancy tastefully decorated. All her dreams were now coming true. The couple had 2 baby girls in rapid succession and plenty of household help to make life as easy as possible. Nancy kept a strict exercise regimen in order her efforts to stay fit and beautiful. She indulged herself in all the wonderful things that she never could buy because she came from a poor home, and now she was buying everything she ever wanted. And her intention to start helping others and do kind acts with the community, well, there'll be time for that in the future. Nathan, however, had a lot of stress at work. His father, while generous, was extremely demanding, and Nathan felt like a servant. He would be made to do this project and that project, and the father had very little ability. He had poor judgment to determine what was important and what wasn't important. And guess what? Nathan consoled himself at the refrigerator, and his handsome face was now quickly covered with deep worry lines that made him look much older than his years. Within a few years, Nathan had already gained 50 pounds. 3 years into the marriage, the quote-unquote glamorous couple was almost unrecognizable. Nathan was now severely overweight, and the swagger he used to carry was now resembling the limp of an old man, a defeated slump. Nancy always had a look of anger on her face because Nathan was forever indulging his daughters. So desperate was he for their approval because he was never home because he had to work so many hours. Without any team effort, Nancy was worn and haggard and seethed and was so angry at her husband's lack of backbone. She took out her anger with exorbitant credit card bills. But what happened next is almost too heartbreaking to recount. Nathan's father passed away, and it was discovered that as many millions of dollars that he had, he owed even more millions of dollars to creditors. The entire family was left penniless, except for an insurance policy that provided for Nathan's mother. And so for 11 years, until their eventual divorce, Nancy followed Nathan from city to city, from job to job. He was never content to make a good living, a good steady living. He was always looking for the big hit. And Nancy did little to discourage his thinking. After all, she wouldn't be content with just a middle-class life. So Nathan would get wrapped up in one far-out sales scheme after another, and it was all so disappointing. After his second bankruptcy, Nancy couldn't take it anymore and moved with the children to another town after their divorce. And here's some thoughts on this story. The demise of this marriage was not surprising. After all, the reasons they married in the first place were no longer there. But what's tragic is that if we had ever sat down with Nancy before she met Nathan and asked her, Nancy, what would you rather have? A financially modest husband who dedicates his whole life to making you happy and loving you? Or would you like an extremely rich husband who's marrying you only for your looks? There's little doubt what she would tell us. Or if we sat down with Nathan and asked him, Nathan, would you rather have a gorgeous wife or someone who's selfless, who'll be there for you, who'll care for you, who'll nourish you and nurture you? There's little doubt what he would tell us. And here's the problem. Summary, ladies and gentlemen. People today don't stop to ask themselves these questions when they date. They just barrel ahead trying to fulfill their expectations without questioning where they got these expectations from in the first place, or whether getting these expectations fulfilled will make them happy in the long run. So that's very important. We have to ask ourselves, what are my values? Where am I getting my values? The dating process itself has become cloaked in mystery. Should we judge someone with our emotions, or should we use our head? What are the common mistakes that people are making, and how do we avoid them? What character qualities should I look for when I'm dating? Or even more difficult to determine, which qualities can I overlook? The world of dating has gotten progressively more complicated over the past 20 years. Maybe our expectations have grown. Maybe the increased size of the world's population has made it harder to match up people. Maybe the secular push towards having it all has infiltrated our thoughts, and our expectations have become unrealistic. How often do I sit with single people and they just trash resumes that I show them? Not my look, not my look. How do you know what your look is? But people are so quick to dismiss people today without giving them a chance. Maybe at this time in history, God is testing our collective commitment to reaching out and helping others to create a family and a life for ourselves. The bottom line is, in this current environment, how am I going to find the right person for myself? How do I navigate this uncharted territory? And here's what we need to do. We have to understand that there are certain obstacles that are getting in the way. We'll try to define them a little bit today. And now our job is to try to remove those obstacles. But the most important thing we need to figure out is, what are my needs? What are my needs? And that's the key. And we need to differentiate between needs and wants. And when I determine what my needs are, I need to draft what's called a top 10 needs list. That top 10 needs list is my GPS when I date. I sit down with people, or I Zoom with people, and I WhatsApp video with people. I help people create the top 10 list. And this is the magic formula for dating successfully. By drafting a top 10 list of your needs, you now know what you need to make you happy. And I'm going to embellish that concept a little bit in a few minutes. What is it that makes a person happy? But it's important to understand, who am I and what are my needs? And once I figure out what my needs are, and I'll show you some examples of what needs are in a second, then I can go about dating the right person without wasting years of my life. It kills me when I have to meet with people who are in their 50s and 60s and never married, never really able to define what their needs are. Or people who divorced after 6 or 7 or 8 months because they never bothered to do the proper homework. It's so much easier to take the time and build the right foundation to prepare for dating, and then go out on date and have an absolute plan of what you need, versus just going out in the blind and winging it randomly. You wouldn't do that if you had a final exam in school. You'd study. So the same thing is required of you. You need to act responsibly, create a top 10 needs list, and then allow that top 10 needs list to help you navigate the dating process. I do this with a lot of people, and like I said, I'd be happy to mentor anyone out there who needs me. Most of the people that I mentor are nationwide, many are across the sea, but I'd be happy to help you. So that's important. Today more than ever, there's never been such a great need for a dating mentor. Okay, so let's move ahead and understand, what is a top 10 list? A top 10 list defines what you need in a person. Before you go out to date, ask yourself, what am I looking for? So here's a potential list. loyal, trustworthy, happy-go-lucky, honest, sensitive, ambitious, relaxed, growing spiritually, has a rabbi, cautious, fun to be with. It's important. Things that are not essential to a top 10 list would be things that are superficial. That's what we call wants. Something like rich or classy or has a Hollywood look or tall or worldly, stylish. That's not going to make you happy. What's going to make you happy is good, solid values. That's the most important thing. Someone who's easygoing, someone who's generous, someone who has no temper tantrums, someone who's flexible. That's important. Another thing what we need to do is that we need to learn how to prepare a resume. A dating resume is a simple document that gets there before you get there. It allows someone to get a quick, cursory idea of who you are. And in that dating resume, you're writing your name, your information, your educational background. Describe yourself, who you are, what you're all about, what you enjoy doing, what you would like to do for fun. If you're involved spiritually, do you go to classes? Do you watch videos on Torah or Jewish philosophy, things like that? Are you involved in chesed organizations? That's always a big one. Do you do acts of charity and kindness? What are your unique traits and qualities? What are some of your personal accomplishments? Also, attach a photo. That's also very helpful. And more important, also references. Have 3 or 4 references down there. I often serve as reference to many people as their dating coach. Obviously, I get many phone calls from people looking at individuals as candidates to date, and so they'll call me up, and so it's nice to be able to share my support for these people. So having a solid, good dating resume is key. I help people write dating resumes. I've written thousands of them. If you need help to get one written, certainly reach out to me, and I'll be happy to do that. The key is you have to plan a strategy to achieve your goal of a first-rate marriage when you date. You have to understand who you are and what qualities you're looking for in another person. One of the most important things, as I said, is to strive to improve your character. And that means that there's so many wonderful Jewish books out there that can help you improve your character. The Garden of Gratitude is one of my favorite. It's a book that's devoted to showing you how to be grateful for everything in your life. And having gratitude helps you see so many miracles in your life. There are other great books, The Ways of the Righteous, The Path of the Just. If you need any suggestions in these areas, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you. Examine yourself physically. This is important as well. Oftentimes, I make a lot of recommendations to people. I'll tell a girl who has very thick glasses, I think you should go to contacts. Unfortunately, I just sent a guy who was 60 pounds overweight to a friend of mine. He helped him lose 40 pounds. Listen, physical attraction is important. Let's not dismiss it. It's key. It's very important. In addition to having a top 10 list, you have to have physical attraction. I often tell people, don't be deluded. If you're not attracted to the person, it doesn't even start. You have to have physical attraction. So examine yourself physically. Ask yourself, am I the best that I can be? Can I improve my appearance? Visit a gym, see a nutritionist, update your hairstyle, whiten your teeth, redo your makeup, change your glasses, put on contact lenses. What about your attitude? How's your attitude? You know how many times I ask people to go home, close the door of their bedroom, look at the mirror and smile 50 times a day for me until they get it? I have one person that went on a date recently after being rejected in the last 10 days 4 times. He just can't crack a smile, the guy. And it comes across in video dating or regular dating, so it's important. You need to develop a positive sense of self, which will help you amazingly in dating. And you need to exhibit zest for life, for happiness, for a positive, bubbly attitude. People are magnetized to individuals who are positive or optimistic. A negative, sullen attitude is not going to win you any friends, not in life and especially not in dating. Remember, key point, you never get a second chance to make a great first impression. Again, let me repeat that. You never get a second chance to make a great first impression. And ask yourself, how's your communication skills? One of the things that I do is I train people extensively in dry run dating. We have mock dates, whether I act as the girl or the guy, to help people get into good conversation flow. Conversation and communication is the key to successful dating, to the point where I created a PDF with about 100 questions that are the best questions to use in dating. And if you'd like it, just send me a WhatsApp request at 305-206-1916 or email me at drjackcohen18@gmail.com and I'll send it to you. It's amazing how often that I've sent this out to people who are stuck. Stuck means that they tell me, I'm going out, but I'm just not feeling it. And I know when they tell me that line, that means the communication is not hitting deeper levels. They're not exposing their vulnerability. So it's important to develop a cachet of solid questions to ask, because that allows you to drill down and get to the tachlis, or the purpose of the dating, and allows you to build a much more deeper relationship. And it's about building deep relationships that is equated with successful dating. Okay, so it's important, and we also believe in planning those conversation subjects in advance. Now, another thing, self-esteem is something we don't want to underestimate. You've got to feel good about yourself in order to feel good with someone else when you date. Build your own self-esteem. Your perception of yourself should not be dependent on what others think of you. If you lack self-esteem, you're going to take offense and misinterpret much of what people say to you. You'll attack rather than calmly understand. You should like the person that you're dating, but it's even more important to like yourself when you're with your date. Someone who allows you to be yourself, who admires and appreciates who you are, who builds your self-confidence and helps promote your growth. In turn, you'll do the same for him or her. So that's one of the key takeaways of dating. Never camouflage who you really are on a date. That's a very bad strategy. Because when you get into real life, if they thought that's who you are and you're really not that, you're asking for trouble. Fooling the person into marrying you is unfair to that person and to yourself. So be careful. You have to be yourself. And you have to allow yourself just to be relaxed and comfortable, because this way you'll be able to know that you're showing your true self and that person is seeing your true self. The search for perfection when we date. Perfect is the enemy of great. Don't keep dating searching for the perfect person, because guess what? They don't exist. You'll never be satisfied. And let me share a beautiful story with you which drills that home. Grandma is sitting on the beach watching her little grandson Simon build castles in the sand with his shovel and pail. He looks adorable with his little baseball cap perched atop his blonde curls. Suddenly a great wave comes and washes Simon into the thickness of the ocean. From the depths of her soul, Grandma starts to cry out to the heavens, and she says, "Please God, help me, bring my Simon back, bring him back, please God, please." With that, a miracle takes place. The tide rolls in and carries back her little grandson Simon right into her arms. Grandma lovingly looks at Simon playing in the sand. Then she looks upwards to the heavens and she says, "But God, what happened to the baseball cap?" And this is the lesson that we have to teach ourselves. Suddenly we want everything in life. We want it all. We want perfection rather than appreciating what we have. No one is perfect. We all come with our challenges and our different expectations, our objectives and opinions. A person who's perfect in one aspect will have flaws in another aspect. We've got to learn to accept and choose to date a person and love that person with his or her positive and negative qualities. Because no one has just a completely perfect profile. The trick is to make sure that the positive qualities outweigh the negative ones. I always tell my clients and my students, do an evaluation. If the positive outweighs the negative, and there's now one specific negative item on there that really bothers you and gets under your skin, you're going in a very good direction. While you're dating, analyze the person and be sure you're happy with how they are. Now, I need to get into an area which is something very interesting and something very enlightening, and that is the following. Only a few generations ago, young women were divided neatly into nice girls and naughty girls. While society gave boys more latitude, they also understand that there was right and wrong ways to interact with the opposite sex before marriage. That's why mothers correctly told their daughters that a boy may play around with one type of girl, but he would marry another type of girl. So there was the girl to play around with, and there was the girl to marry. Unfortunately, life has changed, and even those who would be the most innocent have fallen victim to our new sexual mores. Our conservative religious college campuses once were that way. Now, unfortunately, sleeping together isn't greeted with universal shock as it once did. And as a result, we see more and more people, as they say, hooking up, having these kind of relationships, and that has completely changed the way society exists. The result is, while we still crave intimacy, fewer and fewer people have any clue how to achieve it, or even know what it is. Imagine yourself in the following situation. You and a stranger are having a heated argument. Tempers are rising and you're practically shouting at each other. Realizing things are getting out of hand, your opponent interjects, "Hold on, let's calm things down." You're still angry. That person, he or she, leans forward, puts a hand on your arm, and says, "Wait a minute." Suddenly, for some reason, you feel powerless to continue screaming. Your anger abates, and you concede, perhaps even resentfully, to the suggestion. Now, another scenario. You're at a checkout counter. You dread entering this store because it takes so long to get out. Today is no exception. You've been waiting for what seems like eternity to pay for your purchase and go home. Finally, your turn comes, and you hand the slow-moving cashier your money. Usually you have to pick up the change off the counter, but today the cashier places the change right in your hand. And for a brief moment, you feel the warmth of his or her hand on your hand. Outside, afterwards, you're aware of something strange. For some reason, you feel more warmly towards this store than before. One more scene. You just finished dining at a restaurant. The service was incredibly slow. Your waiter, Dave, finally brings the bill after waiting forever. Hope you enjoyed the meal, he says with a smile as he pats you on your shoulder. Watching Dave return to the kitchen, you feel a surge of generosity and leave a bigger tip than you had intended. On your way out, you comment to the manager of the restaurant about how little waiters earn for working so hard. And the manager tells you, well, it all depends. Take this new guy, Dave. We don't know how he does it, but he pulls in at least 30% more in tips than the other waiters. In each of these above true incidents, researchers will tell you, you just fell prey to one of the most subtle yet powerful forces in human relationships, and that is the power of touch. And that is amazing. Notice now, not once was the contact sexual, even affectionate, but that's what touch does to you. Touch could be called God's superglue for human relations. Right? God created touch between people to work the same way. Take two people unopposed to feeling closer to one another, and touch between them will do the trick. If even simple touch can make this kind of impact, imagine something really good and sexual, coupled with a healthy dose of physical and personal attraction. Why is mere physical experience between man and woman, pleasure as may be, often interpreted as something more than people's minds? Well, guess what? Kabbalah, or Jewish mystical tradition, teaches that Adam and Eve, the first two people to populate this world, the first man and woman, were created as one connected being, and only later were separated. Deep down, in the recesses of all of our minds, we remember once having been together with someone else. Now that we're separate and alone, we yearn to regain our original oneness with someone. Male and female were intended to illuminate together. Only when they attach to one another are they called a light. And God's message to us is simple. Togetherness is our natural state of being. We yearn to be together with someone. But here's the catch. Because you want to be close, and physical contact makes you feel close, you're liable to believe that you're close, while in fact, feeling close and being close are quite different. Touch can skew your perception of reality to the point where you mistake skin-to-skin contact for a heart-to-heart connection, leaving you with delusions of intimacy. When we want something badly enough, we can fool ourselves into thinking that it's it when it's not. And that's what happens when we have physical touch and all types of illicit relationships prior to marriage. Our bodies produce many neurohormones, chemicals that operate through the nervous system. One that gets a lot of press is called oxytocin. Oxytocin has been touted as the love hormone. We'll call it the feeling bonded hormone. It's released by physical closeness, and it makes us feel bonded to the person with whom we're experiencing this closeness. God also wants husbands and wives to stay together, a union called marriage. Oxytocin would be powerful enough if it only created a sense of bonding, but it does more. And it's terrible what happens. Oxytocin, when it flows into the bloodstream, especially of a woman, it turns off skepticism, it turns off caution, and it turns off aversion. And it turns on sociability and generosity and trust, giving it its nickname, the trust hormone. After inhaling oxytocin from a nasal spray, people even invest more money with strangers and donate larger amounts to unknown phone solicitors. And that's what happens. And why is this warning specifically to women? Because it has to do with a biological sex difference. Estrogen, which is the female sex hormone, increases oxytocin's effect. And as a result, when a woman is touched, she's liable to think that she's in a very deep, close, bonding relationship with the man, when it's the farthest thing from that. Girls should learn that bonding is likely effective physical intimacy, not necessarily a response to the other person. The feeling is, he's the one for me, but the reality is, because we touched, I now feel as if he's the one for me, but it may not be necessarily so. What to a girl may feel like love may to a boy be nothing more than another notch on his belt. In other words, boys and girls have serious different goals when it comes to relationships. Since in addition to bonding, oxytocin shuts down the judgment and creates feeling of trust, physical involvement before marriage is very dangerous. It can leave you feeling connected to someone who's totally wrong for you. The danger is worse if Mr. Totally Wrong has no scruples and takes advantage of you. Wendy Shallot, the famous author, was in a store when she spotted a book called How to Succeed with Women. I knew I had to get this book, she said. It was the handbook of the enemy, and I wanted to be up on his tactics. In it, she reports, the male authors essentially counsel their readers to exploit this weakness of women, to exploit the female oxytocin response to their advantage. On a date, the authors write to the male readers, the woman's sizing up the man, looking for reasons why he's not good enough for her. He therefore has to get physical with her fast. Because then instead of looking for reasons why he's not the right one, she'll be looking for reasons why he is the right one. Because this is what oxytocin does. It skews your judgment. It takes you right off course. For a female, in other words, touch is manipulative. The problem, of course, is that a woman manipulated can end up not just badly hurt, but badly used and badly abused. With enough such experiences, a woman can lose her personal boundaries and sense of self. One thing's for sure, she won't be happy. Most of those who suffer depression due to romantic involvement are women, only because they were abused and taken advantage of with this fashion. When it comes to relationships, women are simply more likely to get hurt. We humans are vulnerable. If touch is God's superglue for human relations, it pays to remember that superglue can join two pieces of a broken plate or two of your fingers. Similarly, touch, and particularly the more than casual kind of touch, can make you feel closer to someone, irrespective of who that person is, without ever creating a genuine bond. And that's undoubtedly one reason why, in the world's major religions, physical intimacy is reserved for marriage, where it is not only permissible, but beneficial and also sanctified. In Jewish thought, no human activity is holier than marital sex. As Herman Wouk, the great author, wrote in his popular book, This Is My God, and he wrote the following: what in other cultures has been a deed of shame or a physical necessity or of high romance has been in Judaism one of the main things God wants men and women to do, which is physical intimacy. It also turns out to be the keenest pleasure in life. That is no surprise to a people eternally sure that God is good. Sexuality is one of God's greatest gifts to us. Anything this powerful and potentially beautiful must be handled with care. With the right person, at the right time, physicality can intensify love and sanctity. With the wrong person, at the wrong time, it can wreak emotional and spiritual havoc. It can blind you, but not forever. A woman writes, I once visited a relative where I recently married a man she'd been with for 2 years. She looked depressed. I don't think my marriage is going to last, she told me sadly. Oh no, I exclaimed. But you've been married only 3 months. What could you have possibly discovered that you didn't know the whole time you were living together? For they had been living together for 2 years prior to get married. You would have thought they got to know each other so well after 2 years of living together. She sighed deeply. I just don't think he's intellectual enough for me. I was speechless. When I was dating for marriage, I could usually size up a guy's brains within the first half hour or less. Why hadn't she seen the truth such a long time ago? Then it hit me. She had been physically involved with her boyfriend from early on in their relationship. While the rose-colored cloud was down, he sounded like a rocket scientist. After it lifted, she heard a resounding thud. This is what happens when a woman is blinded by physicality. She doesn't see the truth. She doesn't see in a neutral, objective fashion who she's with. And so we have to be careful. Actually, very interesting statistics in divorce that I studied recently. Almost no cases of divorce ever originated because of problems in intimacy in the bedroom. It's everything else but. So you don't have to worry about it. And perhaps I can close this area out with an interesting story, a true story about a football player. Yes, a Jewish football player. Andy, a college football player, and Jewish. Yes, there are Jewish college football players. I discussed saving touch for marriage. He impressed me as being far more intelligent and sensitive than your stereotypical jock. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Andy showed up at my door. I feel like I owe you a visit, he began, looking serious, because something amazing has happened to me during the past few weeks, and it's got to do with what we were talking about. Well, this sounds intriguing, I told him. Let's hear about it, Andy. First of all, Andy said, in case I didn't tell you, everything you said about reserving touch for marriage made so much sense. Of course, I wasn't exactly ready to put it into practice, but I have to admit, I heard the logic in it. Well, he says, a couple of weeks ago, I happened to meet this girl named Lori. She had become religious, Orthodox, a few years ago. She seemed very bright and friendly, and somehow we started talking. I was so impressed with her. We ended up talking for 2 hours. It was great. We truly connected on a deep level. Now I want to tell you something, Andy says. I wasn't interested in this girl at first. To be honest, her looks didn't do much for me. I couldn't even tell what she looked like under all those loose-fitting clothes that she was wearing. But I really liked her as a person. We really bonded emotionally. Because she was religious, there was no physical contact at all. It was weird that for me not to be able to touch her even casually. Not even a pat on the back. But I respected where she was coming from. Anyway, we got together the next day and spoke some more for about 6 hours. About all kinds of stuff. And also the next day and the day after that. 2 weeks have gone by now, and we spent I don't know how many hours together. Saturday night, we stayed up till 5 in the morning just talking and being together with each other. And still neither of us wanted to stop. All this time, I tell you, I swear, I haven't so much as even laid a hand on her. And you know, Andy continued with a tinge of embarrassment, I'm not bragging, but I'm considered a pretty hot guy. I've always gone out with a lot of really attractive women, basically whichever woman I ever wanted. You should have seen my latest girlfriend. She was a true knockout. I probably don't have to tell you that my relationships were anything but hands off. I suppose most of them weren't so deep either. But now, Andy regales us, for the first time, the exact opposite has happened. Like I said, in the beginning, I didn't even find this girl particularly attractive. It was her mind and personality that I was taken with. But now, I'm crazy about her looks too. Here, let me show you a picture of her. I carry it with me all the time. Isn't she cute? Andy withdrew a photograph from his shirt pocket, gazed at it with feeling and admiration, and handed it to me. It featured a smiling girl, average in appearance. I said, she's cute. He beamed, glancing at the picture before returning it to his pocket, as if he just looked at a girl who was a 10. But that's not the main thing, Andy continued, pausing as if he himself needed a moment to digest the realization he was about to share with me. What's really incredible is that I've never respected a woman so much in my life, and I've never felt so much for anyone in such a short time. And he writes, I can honestly say I love her. He hastened to add, not wanting to lose credibility. It must be nothing compared to the love you feel after being married, but still, I really feel like I love her. And I don't even care what she looks like under her baggy clothes. And so I told him, wow, another big-time player bites the dust. And Andy concludes, I just want to tell you something because I'm blown away. You have something really powerful here in reserving touch till marriage. What do you call it? Cherishing touch? Well, I'll tell you, this stuff is the strongest love potion around. You should bottle it and you should sell it. Welcome to the world of true love, Andy. True love isn't I love the pleasure I get from you. True love is, I love you because of who you are. Again, let's repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. True love is not, I love the pleasure I get from you. It's, I love you because of who you are. This is the nature of an enduring bond between a man and a woman. This is a relationship that lasts and goes for keeps. Since your essence doesn't usually change or die, neither will the love. I want to turn to a great mind in this area called John Gray. He wrote the famous book, Men Are for the Moon and Women Are for Venus. Let's hear what a great secular Gentile thinker has to say on the subject. He writes, physical chemistry alone is short-lived. A man can easily be turned on by a seductive woman who promises sexual gratification without any strings. For many young women, just the opportunity for sexual gratification causes chemistry. And he writes, and he was the counselor to the stars in Hollywood. I was amazed to discover a striking pattern amongst my clients. Quite often women who were extremely attractive, who looked like models and movie stars, and who shared the same complaint. Their husbands were not sexually attracted to them. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't imagine any available man not being attracted to these women. They were stunningly beautiful, but it was true. And I came to understand why. These women had been pursued by men who were primarily sexually attracted to them, but never got to know them. When a man feels sexual chemistry, he thinks he knows a woman. He thinks he's interested in her, that he likes her, that he loves her, but he doesn't know her at all. These men who stopped being attracted to their partners did not betray these women. Both partners were responsible. They put too much emphasis on the physical aspect of the relationship and very little attempt to create the opportunity to know and love each other, to discover they were soulmates. Soulmates is the key. When physical chemistry is not backed up by chemistry in the mind, when it's not backed up by chemistry in the heart, when physical chemistry is not backed up by chemistry in the soul, it can never last. It can never grow in time. Once the pleasures and passions of the body are experienced without the corresponding passions of the mind and the soul and the heart, the physical chemistry will dissipate, which only explains why these Hollywood marriages don't last for too long. Physical attraction can be sustained only for a little bit of time, unless it's backed up by chemistry of the mind and the heart and the soul. And the soul is what we have to worry about. And so we're going to get into that too. Today, unfortunately, far too people date in order to find their soulmate. Instead, they search for a partner because of confusion of priorities. And here's what happens. Imagine you have two people that set up a partnership. Stanley puts in $50,000 into a business. He expects Harry to do the same, which is, I'm going to work the business and put in a certain amount of money. I expect you to do the same. Unfortunately, this is what happens with people when they go about dating. The first thing they do is determine that marriage is an enterprise that requires two people. Since you're only one person, you require a partner. So what kind of a partner are people looking for in dating? Someone who can either match or complement the contribution. Hence, all that men and women today aspire to in marriage is simply finding a partner. Not only do they not find their soulmate, they're not even looking. Here you have one of the biggest mistakes that we're all making. The way people today look for a marriage partner is by sitting down and making a list of everything that person can contribute to the relationship. For example, a man sits down and he says to himself, I'm good looking, I'm well educated, I come from a good family, I have a good sense of humor, I have a great job, therefore I want a woman who's also pretty, highly educated, from a great family. She's got to match what I bring to the table. In other words, a partner in marriage can give you many things. They can bring in physical beauty or an income or decent relatives. Guess what? Although the partner brings in many things, they're only superficial. A soulmate, on the other hand, brings you one thing, but it's the most vital thing of all, an end to your loneliness and a feeling that you're a special person. You should be looking for someone to bring something into the relationship that's deeper than that. Unfortunately, what's happened is that we live in a generation where we're all called aristocrats. The more successful the man or the woman is, the more partners they date, and the later they marry. They're convinced that their jobs provide them with satisfaction, and because since they're good at that, they hold out for the best. And when they feel lonely, they simply go on a shopping spree or some exotic vacation in order to distract themselves. Ours is a generation in which nearly everyone today in the Western world is an aristocrat. But a huge price is being paid by our generation of aristocrats. Whereas poorer classes have traditionally looked for one big thing in the person they date, which is someone to make you feel special, which is someone to make you feel whole. Aristocrats have always looked for so many small things. And because we have much more earning power today, and we have a greater choice about our lifestyles, we also tend to make a laundry list of things that are not important. These aristocrats, feeling smug about themselves, rarely look to share their lives. They don't feel any great need to search their soul for a soulmate. They earn their own money, they own their own cars, they have own circle of friends, and they live in their own apartments since college. Therefore, the very first move by the aristocrat who wants to find a companion is that they look at themselves and list their qualities. A successful woman lawyer today, for example, will make the following mental list to herself. I'm attractive, I'm well educated, I'm from a good family, I possess a good sense of humor, I'm highly independent, I earn $100,000 a year, I'm fun to be with. And when she dates, she looks for someone to match this contribution in the relationship. She first goes out with this guy and that guy and on and on and on. Unfortunately, that's not the way we should date. We shouldn't date like an aristocrat. You know how we should date? We should date like the peasant. And here's how the peasant dates. The peasant has an entirely different orientation in dating. Rather than begin with what he or she has, they begin with what they lack. They look at themselves and they see a person who's vulnerable, who is exposed to the whims and caprices of others, whose life turns on a dime from great joy to possible tragedy. And they feel lonely. Not having complete faith in their own abilities, they date in order to find a lifelong companion who will make them feel worthwhile, even if the rest of the world dismisses them as unimportant. For the peasant, love is a salvation, not a luxury. The nobleman who owns this person will insult and abuse him and tell him he's worthless. But when that peasant comes home to his wife, that peasant's wife will refute the nobleman's words and make him feel like a king. We need someone, if I'm a man, who's going to make me feel like a king, and if I'm a woman, who's going to make me feel like a queen. Whereas the aristocrat dates and marries for many small things, the peasant dates and marries for one big thing. Someone who takes away the pain and makes life a celebration. And that often when I mentor my clients and my students and I send them out on dates, I say, transport your date to a different place where they feel happy, where they feel excited, where they can forget about their worries and their concerns and their work environment agitations. That's what we're looking for someone who takes away our pain and makes life a celebration. In choosing a soulmate rather than a partner, the peasant is given the greatest gift of all, someone who holds him, takes away the pain of living, and gives him or her happiness and pleasure instead. The peasant with his shabby clothes and tiny hut has a one-word advantage over the aristocrat that makes all the difference in a relationship, and that is humility. The peasant is not afraid to acknowledge his or her profound dependency on others. And this is what makes that person such a great lover. They're not afraid to tell the man or a woman that more than loving or admiring them, they need them and cannot live without them. So let's learn to live as a peasant. Now let's get into some black toolbox areas of what we need to look for, what we should have in terms of qualities to really excel at dating. What do women look for in a man? So there are 3 qualities I want to share with you. The first attribute that a woman needs to see in a man is confidence. The first attribute that is attractive to a woman is confidence. A woman can sense when a man is confident. She automatically begins to relax and feel assured that she's in control, that he's in control. Confidence in a man makes a woman breathe deeper, relax, and open up to receive the support that he has to offer. Confidence does not mean that a man has to be perfect, nor does it mean that a man has to have all the answers. Confidence is a can-do attitude. So if I'm a woman and I'm dating the guy, I'm looking for someone who has confidence. That man knows no matter what happens, there's always a solution. Even if he doesn't have the answer, a confident man knows that he can and will find one. With confidence, a man gains the objectivity to stand back and look for what can be done. When a man is confident, he's able to come up with a plan. Women love a man with a plan. That's important. A woman does not like it when a man is dependent on her for too many things. A woman most enjoys the date When a man has a plan and he feels confident about it. He knows what time it is on the date. He knows where he's going. He knows how long it's going to take him to get there, what they'll do when they get there, and he has the money that he needs. The man is confident that all will go well and as planned. And even if things don't work out as planned, he has a backup plan. And guess what? What's the man's backup plan? A confident man's backup plan is that he'll assess the situation and make the best of it. He'll forge his way into unknown territory and have a good time. He'll do his best and things will turn out fine. The second quality a woman looks for in a man is purposefulness. A man with a purpose is most attractive to women. When a man has a plan, when a man has a dream, when a man has direction, when a man has vision, when a man has interest or concern, he's attractive. He's especially attractive to women. It doesn't matter how great or grand the plan or purpose is, but he has a plan. Without a plan, a man is not attractive to a woman. And a man is attractive to the degree that he feels passionate about achieving his purpose. If he wants to build a company, if he wants to become a scholar in Torah, if he wants to finish law school, if he wants to become a doctor, to the degree that he's passionate about it when he communicates it on the date is how much he'll be attractive to the woman. This does not mean that he has to give up his other goals and only wants to make her happy. That's a turn-off. A woman knows that she can't fulfill all his needs. But women crave a man a lot when they see that man has a plan. As long as a man has a goal and hasn't given up, he has a future. Women love a man that has a future and describes his future with passion. When a man is passionate about his work, his interests, his goals, and his future, he's very attractive. Again, when men are stressed, they can forget their purpose, so it's key that they have to maintain that stress. The third quality to look for in a man, responsibility. When a man does what he says he'll do, he automatically expresses a sense of responsibility. He radiates a sense of confidence that he will do what he sets out to do. It doesn't matter if a woman has met him before, has experiences being responsible. She'll be drawn into him like bee to honey. When a woman is attracted to a successful man, what she's really attracted to is the responsible side of him that made him successful. The long hours required to make something happen causes him to emanate a sense of responsibility. When a man is responsible, it says that he cares, and that is what women are most hungry for, that a man cares. When a woman dates a man, she needs to feel not that he just wants to take from her, but he's also capable of giving as well. So that's very important. Now, I want to put out one idea out there, what a woman needs to demonstrate to make herself attracted to the woman. The one quality that makes a woman most attractive to a man is self-assurance. Most women have noticed how certain women have men wrapped around their fingers. They wonder, how do these special women do it? That man will do anything for that woman. These special women always exude an air of grace and trust. They are what we call self-assured women. They respect themselves and they assume others will respect them. A self-assured woman trusts that others care and they want to support her. She doesn't feel alone. She feels supported by her friends and family and by men. In her mind, all men are likable until proven otherwise. When she's not respected, she doesn't take it personally, but she moves on. She realizes that she still deserves what she needs and will try gracefully another approach. And that's important. But some women are naturally self-assured and they're born with it. But for most women, this attribute needs to be developed and cultivated. It's already inside a woman. It just needs the opportunity to come out and be exercised. You can always work on achieving any quality. It's just a matter of working on it. As a woman grows in self-assurance, she'll not always be attracted to men who cannot respond to her in the way she deserves. It's not that men suddenly become perfect for her, or that she finds the perfect man. It's more that she's able to bring out the best in a man because of this quality of self-assurance. Now, as we date, let me give you some clues how to determine if you're with the right person or the wrong person. As we said tonight, many people think that a good marriage partner is someone with whom to have fun and enjoy romance. While these ingredients are wonderful, but it's not what makes for successful dating. They're not going to help you evaluate if the person you're dating is a suitable person to consider for forming a bond with in a permanent fashion. It's a mistake to be lured by outward trappings such as beauty or money. Although attraction is necessary, it will wear off and then the real work begins. Remember, if you're looking to get married, the right spouse will help you navigate your way through life, while the wrong one will send you down a path that you never intended to travel. Unfortunately, people forget to take the long-term picture when they date. You need to ask yourself, if I'm dating a person who will help me grow into a better person, who will motivate me, who will inspire me. Watch out, for love at first sight is not love. The psychologist's rule is if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. When you date, look for someone who has a personality that's acceptable to you, who has intelligence that's equatable, who has a good financial standing, whose religious convictions match yours, who has a good family background. and who shares mutual goals and interests with you. Unfortunately, people close their eyes when they date, unwilling to see what they don't want to see. If you're looking for someone cultured, don't settle for someone narrow-minded and crude. If you're searching for spirituality, don't date someone who's totally materialistic, who talks about money and possessions all the time. If you want a woman happy and accepting dating partner, don't settle for someone who's indifferent or depressed, self-centered or judgmental. We all have faults. Look at this person's flaws in relation to the positive qualities. Assess their flaws. Decide, can you tolerate their shortcomings? No one is perfect, but there are certain things that may get under your skin. When you date, search for a person who's a friend, someone you can talk to, someone you can confide in, someone who listens to you, someone who understands you, who makes the time to understand you and gets you, and values your opinion. When you date, look for someone you can trust and someone whose character you admire, someone with a healthy self-esteem and someone who can mind his business and he maintains your boundaries. So it's important that some of the qualities that we search for. Look for someone who works on himself and herself and wishes to do their part to develop a solid and mutual relationship. Ask yourself, what do I like about his personality or her personality? Is it something that I could live with? Right? Look for someone who brings out the best in you and makes you feel comfortable with yourself. Watch out for incongruent behavior, such as if your date tells you one thing, but you see something else in action. If he or she tells you they respect you, but they treat you with disrespect, never accept that. That's a major red flag. And ask yourself the following questions when you date. Is the person that I'm dating extremely sensitive and overly dependent? And will this get on my nerves? Do I want to be with someone that's very emotionally needy? Are they lovable and loving? Are they complimentary, or do they frequently criticize me? Because that's not acceptable. Are they inflexible or flexible? Are they dominating? Do they try to control me? Are they happy and easygoing or too intense for me? Are they positive or negative? Are they cynical? That's a terrible quality. Watch out for a person when you date who believes they're never wrong, who blames you for everything and never apologizes for any misdeed. Examine every aspect of their personality and ego to decide, can I date this person? Can I eventually live with such a person? Ask yourself more questions. Do I enjoy their company when we're on a date? Are they pleasant to be with? Do we have common interests? If you say, let's go bowling, do they look at you like if you're coming from another planet? If you ask them to go to a museum, do they stare at you like as if you're odd? Look for someone who's mature and responsible. Mature people are committed to working on a relationship. They're willing to give and share without constantly measuring and worrying tit for tat. How do they communicate with you? Do they get what you're saying? Are they tuned into your needs and feelings? Ladies and gentlemen, these are the qualities you need to be searching for, because we want to date, and we want to date for marriage. And once we get married, we want it to be the only marriage we'll ever be in. And these are the things that we need to do to incorporate into our research or to incorporate into our dating experience if we want our dating experience to be a positive one. Does the person that I'm dating have a good sense of himself? Is he considerate? Does he consider how many hours that I've been studying all night before he forces me to go on a date? Is she angry or disappointed that I had an exam this morning and I couldn't take her out? Watch out for avoidant behavior. If after dating for a while they refuse to discuss family, they refuse to reveal personal information, they don't want to meet your friends, that's an incredible sign, a very, very strong sign that this person is hiding something. If a person shuts down and doesn't listen to you, but they're so self-absorbed and only want to hear what they have to say, red flag. Be on the lookout for that. So you have to be careful for that. Always be aware that anybody you marry will have some issues or behaviors that are not exactly to your liking. It doesn't mean you should reject that individual. It only means that you have to understand and ask yourself and be clear with yourself, what issues can I live with, what can I not live with? So I want to wrap up tonight's presentation with a beautiful story that I think everyone in the audience will like. It's a dating story, but it tells a lot. It's a beautiful story. The story goes like this. You know, in Israel, there's a common practice that people go on the highway and they hitch a ride. They call it tramping in Israel. So there were these two young men that were attempting to hitch a ride from one city to another city. And thank God, in Israel, people are very friendly. They'll stop the car and let passengers in. So these two guys were waiting and they were hitching, and suddenly a car comes by and they hop in the back of the car and they say to them, where are you going? So they said they're going to what's called Kever Rachel. This is the grave of Rachel, the tomb of Rachel. Very big place and a very important place in a place called Bethlehem, which is today a little bit dangerous to get there, but it's in Bethlehem. Anyway, they're in the back of the car talking to each other. These were scholars who were learning in the yeshiva, and they're saying, look how life is so difficult for us. We barely make it to the end of the month and barely can pay our bills. Who knows? How will we ever even be able to afford to buy our own apartments? There's no hope for us to buy our own apartments. The driver was listening to this conversation, says to them, you think that it's hard to buy an apartment? You have to hear my story and you'll see that God can do anything. And he tells them his story. An amazing story it was. He said, I grew up in a house where my father worked for the Israel Broadcasting Authority, the one major television station in Israel. At night, he used to moonlight for extra income as the head waiter in a wedding hall. It was called Rechani Wedding Hall. And one night, he was doing his work as the head waiter. In Israel, they have a fascinating custom. They wheel out a cake when there's a wedding celebration, and they stick sparklers on the cake. And the sparklers are meant to be lit, and it makes for a grand reaction. It's a beautiful sight. Sometimes the sparklers don't light when he tries to light them with a match. So he's prepared. What does he have? In the back pocket, he has a small little metal can of lighter fluid, which he squirts at the candle. And this way, when he lights the candles, they automatically ignite, and he gets this marvelous looking cake with sparklers. That night, he was wheeling out the cake, because it was time for the bride and groom to eat the cake, as it's done on all the wedding occasions. He attempts to light the cake, but it's not going. So he takes out his trusty little can of lighter fluid like we use when we have a barbecue, and he squirts a little bit of lighter fluid on some of the candles, and he lights the sparklers. Unbeknownst to him were two little girls playing nearby. And guess what happened? They ran right into the cake. One of these girls caught fire, and suddenly she became a ball of fire. Everyone was just shocked and paralyzed as it was a glowing ball of fire. This girl was just being consumed by fire. When suddenly the photographer was the only one who was not paralyzed by what happened, he suddenly grabbed a tablecloth off of the table, and he took the girl, he rolled her in the tablecloth, but not until the damage was done. She had third-degree burns all over her. And he says, my father, who was a decorated officer in the Israeli army, a tough guy, a man who had gone on countless missions in Lebanon and in the West Bank, you couldn't shake him for anything. He was crying like a baby. He held himself responsible for what happened to that little girl. And so when the ambulance came, he hopped on the ambulance and he went with her, and he was shedding tears. And when they got to the hospital, he kept telling her, I'm so sorry. And they kept telling him, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And eventually, this girl would have to be flown off to a special burn hospital in Paris where she had numerous surgeries. And he tells his guests in the back of the car, years went by, but what happened initially after the incident was my father, who was not an observant Jew, he wasn't religious, decided to have a think with himself, and he started to wonder if maybe this was a sign from God that he should return to his faith. And my father became observant and kept the Torah and mitzvahs. But he says to them, I had no interest in any of this. When my father tried to persuade me to become more interested in Torah observance, I said I would have nothing of it. And I grew up not observant. I went into the Israeli army, and I came out of the Israeli army. I needed a job. There happened to be a company that owned 150 stores that sold candies and sweets in Israel. And I got to know the owner, and he gave me a job. So I worked in one of the 150 stores that he owned. And one day he says to me, you see that girl who's the cashier? She also runs the store for me. She's not observant either, although she was dressed in very modest clothing. She had a shirt which was from the neck on down to the wrist, and a skirt to below the knee. He says, she's not observant. I know you're not observant. The owner says to him, why don't you date each other? I mean, you're both not observant. Maybe you have something in common. He introduced them both, and they started to date. Lo and behold, they liked each other. He's talking, the driver of the car is telling him about this girl, right? So we liked each other, and we started to date. And then after a while, I wanted to propose to her. I'm getting ready to propose to her. But throughout the time that I dated her, I was embarrassed to ask her, but I never asked her. I said to her, you know what? The boss told me you're not observant. How come you dress like you come from the most religious area of Jerusalem? And she says to him, I really am not observant, but the reason that I dress the way I dress is because I have scars all over my body from burns. He turned white as a ghost, and he said to her, I have to ask you a question. Were you ever involved in a fire in a wedding hall? And was it called Rechani Wedding Hall? She says, yeah. How did you know? He tells her, I don't know if you ever want to talk to me ever again. She says, why? He says, because my father was the head waiter, the one who lit the candles that night, and that's how you got burned. And he says, oh my gosh. And she says, it can't be. She says, if that's the case, then it must be meant that we're supposed to get married. So he says to her, come, let's go back and tell my father. He hasn't seen you in years. It must be 17 or 18 years. So they went back to his father, and he said, remember her? Her name was Rena. He says, Rena? Remember Rena? And the father started to cry. He goes, I remember. And he said, I felt so bad. And she says, it's okay. We forgave you for what happened. It wasn't your fault. And from that day on, they decided that God was talking to them. And they decided to get married. And they also came back to their Jewish faith. And they moved in because they had a modest livelihood. They moved in to her mother's apartment where they lived with her mother and his in-laws. One day after living with the in-laws for a year, he says to his wife, honey, he's telling the story to these two guys in the back of the car, I feel bad. We're imposing on your parents. It's about time we rent our own apartment. Why don't we go searching for an apartment to live? Maybe in one of the neighborhoods of Jerusalem or something like that. She says, why should we do that? Why not? She says, because I own an apartment. What do you mean you own an apartment? He says, you don't know? After what happened where I was, with the event where I was burned, there was a lawsuit. My parents sued the hall and they got 3 million shekels. As an award. They went right ahead and bought me an apartment. They had bought her an apartment in one of the swankiest neighborhoods in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, the hotel district. And she says, there's an apartment waiting for me. Well, apparently, they had that apartment and it was rented to a doctor for years, who that very month decided to buy his own place. And they moved into an apartment which was considered like the Park Avenue or 5th Avenue, Rehavia today, is where you have all the hotels. It's one of the swankiest parts of Jerusalem. And he says to his guests, he says, you think that there isn't a God who can't take care of things? He can do things amazingly. Look at my life. Look how I ended up marrying. Look how God took care of me. And there was an apartment waiting for me. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can just imbue the values of the Torah, the faith that we have in a God, and the things that I told you tonight about how to date successfully, you can be happy. You won't waste your time. You won't run around in circles. You'll date successfully. You'll build a wonderful relationship. And you'll have all good. So I just want to put it out there. If you'd like my help in any way in dating or matchmaking or how to write a dating resume, or you want me to discuss a relationship that you're in right now, you want my input in any way, you can do this from anywhere in the world using Zoom or using WhatsApp video. You can reach out to me at 305-206-1916 or simply write me an email at drjackcohen18@gmail.com. It's drjackcohen18@gmail.com.